The third door in the wood shut in my face, and I thanked the man who shut it. He did not know why. He saw a big traveler gone ragged, a cloak worn to the color of ditch water, boots split at the toe, 3 days of road dirt on a face that had never in its life gone unwashed by a servant's hand. He saw a beggar asking the old thing a corner by the fire, a heel of bread, a night out of the rain, and he set his shoulder to the door and pushed it to, and through the last inch of it he said, "We keep no strangers in Fenhold now. Warden's word. Go on to the road." Warden's word. I stood in the mud of my own kingdom and heard my own law unmade by a name I paid to keep it, and I thanked him, because I had come into the wood to learn one thing, and here already was half the answer. Let me tell it plainly, since you will want to know how a king comes to be turned from a door in the rain. I am Raven. The wood is called the Wieldwood, and the hold at its heart is Fenhold, and the whole green kingdom around it is Elderhallow, and all of it is mine, which is to say all of it is in my keeping, for I had learned long since that a king owns nothing, he only holds it a while and answers for how he held it. I had held it alone. There had been a time, when I was younger and my counsel was fuller of hope than of schemes, when men brought me women to look at across a table, and I looked, and my wolf in me lay quiet as a stone, and after enough years of stone, I stopped asking him to wake. A king with no mate is a lonely thing, but not a rare one. I had made my peace with the cold side of the bed, the way you make peace with a bad knee. You stop expecting it to be otherwise, and you walk. What I had not made peace with was the fencing of the wood. It began small, the way the bad things do. My warden, Osric, a careful, clever man with a long jaw and a longer memory for slights, came to me one spring with figures. So many head of deer taken by wanderers who paid nothing. So many nights of fire in the king's wood by folk who owned no hearthright. So many paths worn through good timber by feet that had no lord to answer for them. It cost the crown, he said, and the crown was not so fat these years, and would I not let him post his men on the woodways and take a toll of any who passed, and turn back any who could not pay, and end this old ruinous custom of the wheelwright once and for all. The wheelwright. You will not have it where you come from, perhaps, or you will have forgotten it. It is the oldest law we have, older than my house, older than the hall. It is the right of any soul, high or low, landed or landless, of this kingdom or none, to walk the wild wood, to drink of its streams, to gather its windfall and its berries and its dead wood, to shelter a night under its trees, and to be given, at any hearth in the wood, fire and water and bread if they asked in peace. The land beneath is held by lords, yes, and the deer are the king's, but the walking of it, the passing through, the small mercy of a stranger sheltered, that belongs to no one, because it belongs to everyone. My grandfather's grandfather knelt at the first oak of the Wieldwood, and swore that the wood would be free for the wanderer as long as his line held the hall, and every king since had knelt there and sworn it new, and I had knelt there and sworn it too, a young man with a cold wolf and a warm belief. And then I had gone up to the hall and let 30 years and a careful warden slowly persuade me to forget. Not all at once. That is the thing about a law dying. No one strikes it down. It is fenced, a rod at a time. A toll post here, a locked gate there. A warden's man telling a family of tinkers that the old fort is closed now. Move along. And the people, who take their cue from the hall as surely as a field takes its cue from the sun, learn quickly that a stranger at the door is now a risk and not a duty, and so the doors begin to shut, and one spring you look up and the oldest right in your kingdom is a thing men speak of the way they speak of their grandmothers fondly, and in the past. Osric's figures were good, his men were loyal, his argument was sound, in the small way that arguments about money are always sound. And I very nearly signed the writ that would have ended the wheelwright forever, my pen a hair above the wax, before something in me, call it the old oath, call it the ghost of a young man who had knelt at an oak, made me set the pen down and say, "I will look at it first." "Look at it, my lord," Osric said. He did not like the word. Wardens never like it when a king says he will look. "I will go into the wood," I said, and see for myself whether the right is worth the keeping, or whether you are right and it is only ruin and old custom. I will go quiet. I will go as no one. And when I come back I will sign your writ or I will burn it, and either way you will have your answer. He argued. He argued well and long, about my safety and my dignity, and the folly of a king playing the vagrant. I let him argue, and then I did the thing anyway, because a king who cannot go and look at his own kingdom with his own eyes has already handed it to his wardens, and I was not ready to do that yet. So I put off the crown. I put off the good cloak and the rings and the boots that had never known a stone. I rubbed the road into my face and my hands. I took an ash staff and a beggar's stoop, and I went down into the wildwood at the wood's far edge where no one knew my face, and I began to walk it as the law said any man might walk it, a stranger, owning nothing, asking only the old small mercy at the doors I passed. And the doors shut. The first was a farm hold at the wood's edge, a good stone house with smoke going up sweet, and the smell of a stew that made my empty belly turn over. The woman of the house looked at me through a crack and said, not unkindly, that they'd had trouble from the road folk this year and the warden had warned them, and would I try the next hold along. She shut the door gently. I remember she shut it gently, and that this seemed to me worse somehow than if she had slammed it. The second was worse and honester both. A big red man with an axe in his hand who did not open the door at all, only shouted through it that the wheelwright was dead and good riddance, and if I was on his land come morning, he'd have the warden's men on me. I stood in his yard in the falling dusk and understood that he was afraid not of me, a tired stranger, but of the toll and the fine and the man on the woodway who would want to know why he'd harbored someone who hadn't paid. Fear runs downhill from a hall as surely as water. Osric had done his work well. The third was the man in Fenhold who thanked me not to trouble him. Warden's word, go on to the road. I went on to the road. It was full dark by then and a thin rain had begun, the kind that does not fall so much as hang, so that you are wet all through without ever having felt it land. I was cold and I was hungry and I will admit it, older than I had been at the first door, older in the way that disappointment ages a man, which is quicker than years. I had come to test the law and the law was failing its test, hold by hold, and I found that this did not fill me with the cold satisfaction of a king proved right to fence a wood. It filled me with a grief I had no name for. Somewhere along the fencing of the wood we had fenced something out of ourselves. That was when I saw the fire. It was small and low and off the road, back among the black trunks where no hold stood and no hearth ought to be, a wanderer's fire, a landless fire, exactly the sort of fire Osric's men rode out to stamp cold. And here is the thing I have never been able to explain to anyone since, so I will only tell it and let you make of it what you will. I saw the light of it come up through the wet trees, orange and small and swimming, and before I had taken a single step toward it I knew the way. Not the way through the trees, any fool sees a fire and walks to it. I mean I knew the way, the whole shape of the going toward it, the way you know the road home in the dark of your own hall, the way you know your own name before you are asked. My feet had never walked that ground, and they knew it. Something in me that had lain cold as a stone for 30 years turned over once, slow and warm and certain, like a sleeper who hears, far off, the one voice he has been waiting his whole life to hear, and does not yet wake but smiles. I did not know her name yet. I did not know her face. I knew only the fire and the road to it that I somehow already knew, and I went toward it out of the rain like a man going home to a home he had never had. She heard me before I was close. Of course she did. A woman who keeps a fire in the wild wood at night learns to hear a footstep at 40 paces, or she does not keep it long. I heard the small sounds of someone rising, unhurried, and the low warning huff of a beast, and I stopped at the edge of her firelight with my hands open and empty, and my staff laid down in the wet leaves. The way you show a wary thing you mean it no harm. I asked the old right, I said. My voice came out rougher than I meant, from cold and from something else. Fire and water and bread if you have it, in peace. And I'll take the far side of your fire and be gone at dawn. For a long moment she said nothing, and I looked at her across the low flames. She was not young and she was not old, somewhere in the long middle where a face has been weathered into its true shape and stopped changing, and I have come to think that is the most beautiful age there is, though I could not have told you so then. She wore no lady's gown and no maid's drab either, but a plain wool the color of the wood itself, mended in a dozen places by a careful hand, layered and belted for the road, and a cloak that had kept off more rain than mine had ever seen. Her hair was dark, going gray at the temples, and bound back out of the wet. Her hands, when the firelight found them, were a working woman's hands, but they were held easy, not fisted. And her eyes, quick, dark, taking me in the way she must have taken in 100 strangers, weighing not what I carried but what I was, her eyes were the steadiest I had ever met, and they were not afraid. Beside her, half in the shadow, an old gray wolf stood with its head low and its yellow eyes on me, and did not growl again, only watched. "The old right," she said at last, and something moved at the corner of her mouth that was almost a smile and almost a grief. "There's a word I've not heard spoken out loud in 3 winters. Most is asked now, they ask for charity and hate themselves for it. You asked for the right." She looked at me a moment longer. "Come to the fire then, stranger. You'll not take the far side of it either, the wind's coming round and the far side's where the smoke'll go. Sit here out of it. Fen won't touch you unless I say, and I'll not say." And she moved to make room at her own fire for a wet stranger she had never seen, in a wood where every door for a day's walk had shut against him. And she did not know, she could not have known, that she had just done, easy as breathing, the thing that a whole kingdom had forgotten how to do. I sat. The warmth came into me and hurt, the way warmth does when you have been cold too long, and she watched me the whole while with those steady eyes, and after a bit she reached into a wrapped cloth and broke a piece of dark bread and held it out to me across the fire. "It's yesterday's," she said, "but there's not a thing wrong with yesterday's that a bit of hunger won't fix." She almost smiled again. "I'm a Lowen. This is Fen. He's older than he lets on, and he steals more than he earns, but he's the last free wolf in the Wieldwood, so I don't complain of his manners." She tipped her head. "And you?" I opened my mouth to give her the false name I had made ready, the miller's son name, the nothing name. And I found I could not. It stuck in my throat like a stone. I had lied my way to her fire in every way but one, the ragged cloak, the stoop, the road dirt, all of it a lie, and I could not add my name to the pile of them, not here, not to her. So I gave her the only true thing I could give and still keep my secret. "Ro," I said. "It is what my mother called me, before I was a king, before I was anything. My name is Ro." "Well, Ro," she said, and settled back by her fire, and old Fen sighed and lay down between us with the great weariness of an old dog. "Eat your bread. And in the morning I'll show you the woodway that the warden's men don't watch, so you can be on to wherever you're going without a toll you can't pay. There's still 1 or 2 of us keep the old paths open. Not many, but 1 or 2. I ate her yesterday's bread by her landless fire, and it was better than any feast that had ever been carried into my hall, and I did not sleep at all that night, but lay watching the fire go down and listening to her breathe, and I thought. I came to learn whether the old right was worth the keeping. And I have found the only person in my kingdom who still keeps it, and she keeps it not because a hall told her to, and not for a coin, and not to any watching eye. She keeps it in the dark, for a stranger, out of nothing but the plain grace of the thing. And the stone in me that had not turned in 30 years lay warm and awake, and I knew, with a certainty that frightened me, that I was not going to be able to walk away at dawn. I stayed 3 days. It is not a hard thing to make a beggar's 3 days stretch when the beggar does not want to leave. I told her my ankle had turned on the wood root, a small lie, and it shamed me, but it bought me a morning, and the morning bought the rest. She did not send me off. She was going the same way I claimed to be, up the long green heart of the Wildwood toward the high holds, and she said a lame man was safer walking with someone than alone with the warden's riders about. And so we walked together, Eloan and old Finn and the ragged stranger called Ro, and in 3 days of walking I learned more of my kingdom than in 30 years of holding it. I learned that she owned nothing, and that this was not a thing that had happened to her, but a thing she had chosen. She had been born to a settled hold, she told me, a good enough one, and there had been a mate meant for her and a hearthright and all the small safeties, and then a hard winter had taken the hold and the mate both, and the pack that should have taken her in had looked at a landless widow with no dowry and no wolf of her own, and decided she was a mouth they need not feed. They had not been cruel about it. That was the part she said last and quietest. They had not been cruel, only careful, only certain that a woman who owned nothing was owed nothing. They had turned her out with a blessing and a loaf, and the firm shut door of good conscience, and she had learned, that first landless winter, exactly how thin the mercy of the settled folk had worn. "But I'll tell you what I learned, Ro," she said on the second evening, poking the fire with Finn's gray head on her knee. "I learned that the ones who own nothing are the ones who keep the old right alive, not the holds. The holds have too much to lose now, a toll, a fine, the warden's frown. It's the landless keep it. The tinkers, the road widows, the wolfless folk, the ones already turned out. We know what a shut door means, see, because we've stood on the wrong side of enough of them. So we keep our fires open. There's a whole quiet net of us up and down this wood, a fire here, an open path there, a word passed along of which fords the warden watches. We feed the wanderer because we are the wanderer. The old law doesn't live in the hall anymore. It lives out here in the folk with nothing in the dark, where no king ever looks." She glanced at me sidelong, and her mouth did its almost smile. "No offense to kings." "None taken," I said, and looked hard into the fire, and thought I would carry that sentence to my grave. "In the folk with nothing in the dark, where no king ever looks." I had signed toll writs and read wardens' figures, and never once known that under my careless hall, a whole company of my poorest people had quietly become the last keepers of my house's oldest oath, had kept it better than I, in the very teeth of my own men. I learned other things in those 3 days. I learned that she knew the wood the way I knew my own hall, every ford and windfall and berry brake, every place a lost child might shelter, every den where Finn's wild kin still ran. I learned that wanderers came to her fire the way birds come to a fed sill. One night a family of road tinkers, another night an old blind man she called Bevis, who had once been a hearth keeper in a hold that had turned him out when his eyes went, and who now walked the wood by memory and the kindness of folk like her. I watched her feed them all from a store that was never more than barely enough, and never once make a soul feel the smallness of it, and I watched the way the wood's wild things came to her. How Finn was only the boldest of them, how the deer did not startle from her, how she moved through the wild as through a thing that knew her and did not fear her. And I learned that she was in danger, and that she knew it, and that she would not stop. For the warden's fencing had reached the deep wood now. On the second day we came on a new toll gate flung across the old green ford where folk had crossed free for 1,000 years, raw new-cut timber, a chain, 2 of Osric's men bored and cold beside a brazier, and a board nailed up with the warden's mark and the word closed. Eloan looked at it a long moment, and then she did a thing that stopped my heart in my chest. She walked up to the gate, calm as morning, and she took the old path around it, the wanderer's path, the one the warden's men could not close because it ran through the trees where no gate could hold, and she called back over her shoulder to me, loud enough for the tollman to hear. "The ground's the Lord's, Ro, but the walking of it is ours, always has been. Come on." One of the tollmen rose and put his hand to his sword and said, "That path's closed too, woman. Warden's word." And Eloan stopped and turned, and I saw her weigh him, this bored cold boy with a borrowed authority, and I saw her decide. "Then the warden's word is wrong," she said, not loud, not angry, just certain. For the king himself knelt at the first oak and swore the walking of this wood free to any soul that comes in peace, and your warden is not the king, and neither, boy, are you. Find me if you can catch me. You can't. And she walked on into the trees, unhurried, with her wolf at her heel and her chin up, and the toll boy looked after her and did not follow, because some part of him, some old buried part, knew that she was right and he was not. I followed her into the trees with my heart going like a war drum, and it was not fear that drove it. It was the thing that had turned over in me the first night by her fire, and it had a name now, and I could no longer pretend I did not know the name. She had thrown my own oath in a toll man's teeth to keep a stranger's road open, and she had not the faintest idea she'd done it beside the king who swore it. My wolf, that cold stone, was not a stone anymore. He was awake and he was singing, low and steady, a sound I had never made in all my years, and the whole of it, her, the wood, the old law living in her when it had died in me, the whole of it fit together in my chest like a key turning in a lock I had not known was locked. I nearly told her then. We had stopped to breathe deeper in the trees, and she was laughing under her breath at the toll boy's face, and she turned that laugh on me, and it went through me like light through water, and the truth came right up to my teeth. I am the king. I am the oath you flung at him. Come to my hall, and I will make the whole wood free again, and you its Luna, and I will spend the rest of my days trying to be worth the woman who kept my house's honor when my house forgot it. And I did not say it, and I want to tell you why, because it matters more than any other thing in this story. I did not say it because I did not want to be the reason she chose right. Do you see? If I told her I was the king, then everything after would be poisoned. Every kindness she did, every stand she took, I would never again be certain whether she did it for the plain grace of the thing, or whether she did it for the crown that had appeared in her firelight. And worse, far worse, she would never again be certain either. I had watched 30 years of women brought to my table smile at me the way you smile at a throne, and I had never once been able to believe a single smile, and I had grown a cold stone in the place where a mate's certainty should live, and I was not going to do that to a Lowen. She had kept the old right in the dark, for nothing, where no king could see. I would be a poor sort of king and a poorer sort of man if the first thing I did on finding her was to take that dark away and put a crown in it. Let her keep choosing in the dark a little longer. Let me be sure, not of her. I was already sure of her. Let me make her free to have chosen it before she ever knew there was a throne in the trees. It was the only gift I had that was worth the giving. So I bit down on the truth and I said instead, you'll get yourself fined, or worse. Likely, she agreed easy. The wardens wanted me gone a while. I'm bad for his figures. I keep proving the paths can't be closed. She shrugged. But a wood's not free if only the free and safe walk it, Ro. It's free when the ones with nothing to lose keep walking it in front of the ones too frightened, so the frightened ones remember it can be done. Somebody has to be the fool who won't stop. Might as well be a woman who owns nothing. What'll they take from me? And she smiled her almost smile, and did not know she had just described. Better than any counselor I ever kept. The whole reason a king's oath is worth more than a king's toll. That night the danger stopped being a thing far off. We had come to a wide green hollow deep in the wieldwood where the wanderers gathered when the wood turned hard. A kind of camp, though no one owned it. A ring of low fires and lean-tos, and the quiet folk with nothing whom I had never in my life laid eyes on before, though I had ruled them all my days. Old blind Bevis was there, and the Tinker family, and a road widow with 2 small children, and a handful of others, and a Lowen went among them the way a good hearth-keeper goes among her own, a word here, a look at a sick child there, a share of the little she had. I sat at the edge and watched, the ragged stranger, and I was ashamed, and I was in love, and I could no longer have told you where the one ended and the other began. Then Fen came off his belly with a snarl, and the horses came. Osric's men, a full patrol, 6 riders, torches, came down into the hollow at a hard trot with the warden himself at their head, and the whole camp came up in a panic of scattering fire and snatched up children. And Osric's voice went out over all of it. cold and carrying, the voice of a man who has decided that mercy is a kind of weakness he can no longer afford. "By the warden's writ," he called, "this gathering is unlawful. The king's wood is closed to vagrants. You'll clear it by dawn, all of you, or answer to a fine you can't pay and a road gang you'll not walk off." His torch swung across the frightened faces and found Alowan, standing straight in the middle of the scattering, not running, and his long jaw set. "You," he said, and there was an old satisfaction in it. "The Strayfoot, I know you. You're the one keeps the paths open behind my gates. You're the one that won't move along." He swung down off his horse. "You harbor vagrants, you defy the writ, you own not a rod of land nor a stitch of hearthright in all Elderhallow. You are the very ruin the king sent me to end. I'll have you off this wood tonight, woman, and off it for good, and I'll burn this rat's nest behind you so it can't be built again." And I sat there in my ragged cloak with my crown a day's ride away, an unknown beggar in the dark, and I watched my own warden lift a torch toward a road widow's linta with 2 small children in it, in my name, by my writ, for the crime of keeping the oldest law I had ever sworn, and I felt the last of the stone in me break, and I began, very quietly, to rise. But Alowan was faster. She stepped between Osric and the fires, between the warden and the frightened folk, with her empty hands open and her chin up, and she was not loud, and she was not afraid, and the whole hollow went still to hear her. "You'll not burn it," she said, "and you'll not have me off. Not because you can't, you've 6 horses and I've a wolf and my own 2 feet, but because you'd be breaking a law older than your writ, and you know it, Osric, whatever you tell your figures. The ground's the king's. Nobody argues the ground. But the walking of the wood, the sheltering of the wanderer, the fire and the water and the bread to any soul in peace, that's the wheelwright, and the king himself swore it free at the first oak, on his knees, in front of his whole house, and no warden's writ can unswear a king's oath. You're not closing the wood. You're only teaching a whole kingdom to break the king's own word for him. And one day there'll be a king who remembers he swore it, and he'll want to know who taught his people to forget." There was a silence in the hollow you could have walked on. Osric's jaw worked. "Pretty," he said at last, cold. "And who are you, Strayfoot, to school me on the king's oath? You own nothing. You are nothing. There's not a soul in this wood with less right to speak of the king than you." And she said, and I have carried this sentence too, all the days since, she said, quiet and certain, "There's not a soul in this wood who's kept the king's oath better than me, and that's the only right that matters." Osric lifted the torch, and I stood up out of the dark at the wood's edge, and I let the beggar's stoop fall off me like the lie it was, and I found, standing to my true height with 30 years of a king's authority coming up my spine, that the whole hollow had turned to look at the ragged stranger who had risen, and that some of them, the older ones, the ones who had knelt at holds in better years, had gone very still, because a beggar does not stand like that, and a beggar's voice does not carry like that when he says, "Into the frozen dark. Then let the king answer for his own oath, for I am here." I walked into the firelight. I did not hurry. I let them see me come, the road dirt still on me, the ragged cloak, and under it, now unmistakable, the thing the dirt had hidden, the way a man stands who has never in his life doubted that he would be obeyed. I saw Osric's face go the color of tallow. He had served me 20 years. He knew my face under any dirt in the world, and he knew my voice, and he went down onto one knee in the churned mud of that hollow before his mind had even finished telling him it was so, and his 6 riders went down after him like a wave breaking, and the torch dropped from his hand and hissed out in the wet leaves. "My lord king," Osric said, and his cold certainty was all gone out of him. "My lord, I did not, you were not meant to." "No," I said, "I was not meant to see it. That was rather the point of my going quiet, Osric. A king sees only what his wardens choose to show him, so I chose to go where no warden could choose for me, and I have seen a great deal." I looked around the hollow, at the frightened folk climbing back to their feet, at the road widow clutching her 2 children, at old blind Bevis turning his ruined eyes toward my voice with a slow, wondering smile, at the tinkers, at all my poorest people who had kept my house's honor while my house forgot it. I came into this wood to learn whether the old rite was worth the keeping, or whether it was only ruin and custom as my warden told me. I have my answer. I turned back to Osric, still on his knee. Rise. You'll not be punished tonight. You did only what I let you do, and the fault of that is mine before it is ever yours. But hear me, and let every soul in this hollow bear witness, and carry it to every hold in Elder Hallow by morning. The wheelwright stands. It stood before my house, and it will stand after it. Every toll gate in this wood comes down by week's end. Every path is opened. And any soul, high or low, landed or landless, of this kingdom or none, who walks this wood in peace, and drinks of its water, and shelters a night beneath its trees, and asks fire and bread of any hearth, shall have it, as the law has always said, and as I, fool that I have been, forgot. Fence a man out of the wild, and you have not saved a coin. You have cut the oldest cord that binds a kingdom to its own mercy. I very nearly cut it. I will spend the rest of my reign mending it. Osric bowed his head, and the hollow, which a moment before had been a place of terror, let out its held breath all at once, a great soft sound like wind going through the wood, and somewhere a child began, uncertainly, to cry with relief, and its mother laughed and wept at once, and old Bevis lifted his face to the dark and said, in a voice gone thin with age and wonder, I lived to hear it. I lived to hear a king swear the old rite new. I did not think I would. And through all of it, I had not yet dared to look at Elowen. I looked at her now. She stood exactly where she had stood to face the warden, straight-backed in her mendied wood wool, with old Fen pressed against her leg, and she was looking at me, at Roe, at the ragged stranger she had taken in from the rain, at the man she had fed yesterday's bread and shown the quiet paths and walked 3 days beside, and her steady dark eyes were not steady now. I watched the whole of it move across her face, the recognition, the impossibility, the 3 days of it rearranging themselves behind her eyes into a shape she had not chosen and had not asked for, and under it all, plain and terrible, the beginning of a hurt. Because I had lied to her. However good the reason, I had sat at her fire and eaten her bread and let her fling my own oath in a warden's teeth to save a stranger's road, and all that while I had known, and she had not. And now she stood in a hollow full of kneeling men and understood that the one soul in the wood she had let close had been the throne itself, wearing dirt. I did the only thing there was to do. I crossed the hollow to her, and in front of the warden and the riders and all my landless people, I went down on one knee in the mud before a woman who owned nothing, a king, kneeling to a stray foot, and I heard the whole hollow catch its breath again, and I did not care. Elowen, I said low, only for her, though they all heard it. My name is Raven. It has been Raven all along. I gave you the only true piece of it I could, Ro, what my mother called me before I was ever a king, because I could not bring myself to lie to you with a false name at your own fire, and I could not tell you the whole of it either, and I will tell you why, and then you may do with me whatever you judge is right. I looked up at her. I did not tell you I was the king because I did not want to be the reason you chose rightly. I have spent 30 years unable to believe a single kindness done to the crown, because a crown poisons a kindness. You can never after know if it was done for you or for the gold on your head. You kept the old rite in the dark, alone, for strangers, for nothing, where no king could see. If I had shown you a throne in your firelight, I would have taken that dark from you forever, and you would never again have been certain, and neither would I, so I let you keep choosing in the dark a little longer, because it was the only gift I had that was worth giving you, the chance to have done it all before you ever knew there was a throne to do it for. I bowed my head. It was a lie, and lies are a poor gift however you dress them, and I am sorry for the hurt of it. But I am not sorry. I know now, past any doubt in the world, exactly who you are. There is not another soul in my kingdom I could ever be certain of. There is only you. You are the one I stopped hoping for. and I would rather kneel here in the mud and have you turn me away, knowing the truth, than sit in my hall another 30 years certain of no one. The hollow was so still, I could hear the wet fire hiss. Eloan looked down at me for a long, long moment, and I watched the hurt in her face wrestle with something else, and I did not know which would win, and I let it be hers to decide, because after everything, that was the whole of what I had learned in her wood, that the truest things cannot be taken or told or commanded. They can only be freely given, or they are worth nothing at all. "You lied to me," she said at last quietly. "I did. You ate my bread and let me stand up to that man, not knowing you were the very king I stood him up in the name of. I did that too. It is the worst of it, and I knew it while I did it, and I did it anyway because I was afraid not of him, of you, of your kindness stopping being real the moment it knew there was a crown to be kind to. I made myself hold her eyes. I would undo the lie if I could. I would not undo the knowing. Those are two different things, and I'll not pretend otherwise even to buy your pardon." And something moved at the corner of her mouth, the almost smile, the one I had watched come and go for 3 days, the one I had already come to think of as the truest weather in the world, and she said, very low, so that only I and Fen and the fire could hear it, "You great fool of a king. Do you know what you've done?" "Told you," I said. "You've gone and made it so I can never be certain either." Her eyes were bright now, too bright, and her voice caught. "I took in a ragged stranger out of the rain because the old rite said I ought, and because I liked his tired face, and for 3 days I let myself think, never mind what I let myself think. And now you're a king, and you're kneeling in the mud and half the woods watching, and if I say yes to whatever it is you're kneeling to ask, I'll spend the rest of my days wondering if I said it to the man or to the crown. You've done to me the very thing you were so noble about sparing me." She shook her head, and the almost smile broke at last into a whole one, wet and rueful and helplessly warm. "So we're even, Ro. We're both of us robbed of our certainty. There's nothing for it now but to be uncertain together, and spend a good long while finding out. I have been a king for a long time. I have heard oaths of fealty and songs of victory, and the roar of whole halls raised up at my name. I have never in my life heard anything to touch the sound of "there's nothing for it now but to be uncertain together." My wolf, that 30-year stone, sang so loud in me I thought the whole hollow must hear it. But I did not reach for her. I had learned that much in her wood. I stayed on my knee and I said, "Then let it be on your terms, all of it. I am not asking you to a throne to be shut up in it. I have watched you, Eloan. I know a shut door is the one thing in the world you cannot abide, and I'll not be one. Tell me what would let you say yes and still be free. Whatever it is yours before you ask it." She was quiet, thinking, and I loved her the more for it, that she did not fall on the offer but weighed it, the way she weighed everything, carefully and true. "The wood stays free," she said. "Not by your leave, by right. Sworn new at the first oak in front of the whole hall, the way your grandfather's grandfather swore it, so it's not a gift you can take back on a bad year and a warden's figures. And the gate, Fenhold's wood gate, the great one, it stays open. Not open when someone knocks. Open. Unbarred dawn to dark, so that any soul who comes to it in peace knows without asking that they'll not be turned. I'll unbar it myself every morning with my own hands so long as I'm able, so that I never forget what a shut door felt like, and neither does your hall." She looked at me steadily. "And I keep the wood. I don't sit in your hall being a Luna in a gown. I walk the wood, I keep the paths, I feed the wanderer, I look after the folk with nothing because they're mine, Raven. They were mine before you were, and I'll not leave them for a soft chair. If your crown can bear a Luna with mud on her boots and a wolf at her heel, and a whole company of landless folk for her true court, then yes. Yes, I'll be uncertain of you for the rest of my life, and glad of it. But if it can't, if you want a lady behind a shut door, then I'll show you the quiet path to the road come morning, king or no king, and we'll both of us go on." I rose then, slowly, so she could stop me if she wished, and she did not, and I took her working hands in mine. the hands that had broken yesterday's bread for a stranger in the rain, and I said, so that the whole hollow and the warden and my grandfather's ghost at the first oak could all hear it. A Luna with mud on her boots and a wolf at her heel, and the landless folk of Elderhallow for her true court, is the only Luna my hall has ever needed and never once deserved. Keep the wood, keep the gate open, keep me honest. I have held this kingdom 30 years and forgotten its oldest oath, and you have owned nothing and kept that oath alive in the dark the whole while, so it is plain which of us the wood belongs to, and it is not the one wearing the crown. I lifted her hand and did not kiss it like a courtier, but pressed it, warm, between both of mine, like a man warming himself at the only fire that ever mattered. Come and be uncertain of me, Eloin. It will take the rest of our lives, and I can think of no better way to spend them. And she came. The wood is free. We swore it new at the first oak, all of us. The very next dawn, I on my knees in the wet dark with the old words coming back to me whole, as if they had only been waiting under 30 years of dust, and Eloin beside me, not kneeling, because she had never once forgotten and had no need to swear again what she had never let go. And the whole hall gathered to witness, and Osric among them, chastened and in the end better for it, for a warden who has knelt in the mud of his own error makes, I have found, a far wiser keeper than one who never doubted. The toll gates came down by week's end. The paths are open. The fires of the landless folk burn now without fear, and the wanderer who asks the old rite at any hearth in the Wealdwood is given fire and water and bread, and is never turned to the road in the rain, and a whole kingdom is slowly, slowly remembering that its mercy was never a weakness it could not afford, but the one cord that bound it to its own soul. And every morning, before the hall is well awake, before the crown is on my head, a woman in mended wool with a grey wolf at her heel walks down to the great wood gate of Fenhold and lifts the bar off it with her own 2 hands and sets it wide, so that the light comes in and any soul upon the road can see from far off that here at least is a door that will not shut. She does it herself. She will let no one do it for her. She says she never wants to forget what a shut door felt like, and she never wants the hall to forget either, and I have stopped arguing because she is right, as she is nearly always right, and because there is no sight in all my kingdom I would rather wake to than that one. One morning in 7, I go with her. I put off the crown and the good cloak, and I take an ash staff, and I walk the free road at her side as no one, as Roe, as a man, as the tired stranger she once took in from the rain, and we go out into the Wealdwood among the folk with nothing, and she shows me the fords and the windfalls and the quiet paths, and old Bevis knows my footstep now and calls out to me by my true small name, and the wild things do not fear me because they do not fear her. And for one morning in 7, I am not a king who owns a kingdom, but a man walking free through a wood that belongs to no one and to everyone, beside the only soul I have ever been certain of, and uncertain of, both at once, all my days. She asked me once on such a morning why I still do it, why a king goes ragged one day in 7 to walk his own wood as a beggar, now that the wood is free and there is nothing left to test. And I told her the truth, which is the only thing I have given her since the night I gave her my mother's name. Because the wood was never mine to give, I said. It was only ever ours to keep open, and a man forgets that, up in a hall behind a crown. So one morning in 7 I come down and let the wood remind me, and I let you remind me, and I walk out of my own gate as no one so that I never again forget what it is to stand on the wrong side of a door and to be, against all the odds of a hard world, taken in. She did not answer that. She only reached over and took my hand, the way she'd handed me yesterday's bread across the fire the night the whole of my life turned over, and we walked on together into the free wood, uncertain of each other and glad of it, with the light coming up gold through the open gate behind us, and the last wild wolf in the Wealdwood loping easy at our heels.